Good morning. We're in my office this morning. I'm Tony Momberger with the Redlands Daily Facts, and I'm sitting here with Bill Moore's daughter, Lucretia Moore-Irving. The Moore family ran the newspaper here as of 5 years after its inception, and they took over it in 1895. And thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Let's start with the very beginning. This paper was founded, I know, 122 years ago by a Mr. Howe, which we don't care about for the purposes of this interview, but then your grandfather?
Captain William Moore, who was my great-grandfather, started the paper in 1895, and he came out, he was a Civil War veteran, and he came out to California for his health, and he was very sick in 1890, so I don't know why he waited so long to come to California. But he came with his older daughter. His wife stayed back in Pennsylvania for a while because her father was very ill, and then she came out and joined them later. And my grandfather, Paul W. Moore, who ended up running the paper, came out after that. And
your great-grandfather took over a newspaper that was brand new, and he was ill?
Well, I think he was doing all right when he came. He felt he needed something to do, and he was actually quite young. Well, I guess in standards then, because he was 58 when he died, but
wow.
He died in 1899, and so he ran the paper a short period of time.
And his son, Paul,
yes,
was still in Pennsylvania and then came out afterward.
Right. And then my grandmother, who was my namesake, Lucretia Moore, Prendergast Moore, and we don't know where the name came from exactly. She was named after a great aunt, and after that we don't know how she obtained the name. But my grandmother came to California to Redlands in 1893, and she went to Kingsbury School, and she graduated from from Redlands High School, and lived in Redlands all her life. And she married Paul W. Moore in 1907. And that was kind of interesting. They were married on a Tuesday at 8 o'clock at night, which seemed a very strange time. And I thought, I haven't had a chance to do any research, but I don't know whether it was common for people to be married at that peculiar time or not. But anyway, the Prendergast family, too, had 7 children, and Jeffrey Prendergast was the oldest, and he was very prominent in Redlands. He was a state assemblyman, he was on the library board, he was hospital board, no, not hospital, Redlands, Bear Valley Mutual, that's what he was.
Do you know when he was on the library board?
Oh, in the 20s probably. He was on for a long time. And he was the first graduate from Redlands High School in that class. And then there was one other Prendergast who, descendants are still in Redlands, and that was Joe Prendergast, who ended up marrying Gwen Davis, who was the Jenny Davis family.
Oh my gosh.
So, the grandson, Jim Prendergast, and his wife, Tammy, still live in Redlands. And also their 2 sons were married and what have you, Scott and Mike, and they have the Rockview Dairy.
The drive-through dairy.
Yes.
It was Knudsen, and then it was Altadena
right.
on Fern and
yes, and they still have it. So they are, great-grandchildren of Captain William Moore.
Okay.
Nowhere would they be if they're Prendergast. Maybe they wouldn't be. I'll take
that
back.
Of his wife?
Yeah,
No,
they would be
wife.
Prendergast. So the Prendergasts are Frank E. Prendergast, who came back in...
okay, and Paul married the Prendergast family. And
also Francis Prendergast was a founder of the Fortnightly Club. But he died at 56 years old of pernicious anemia, which my father had also, but it was curable by shots, and now I think you just take a pill and that takes care of it.
Lot of Redlands royalty, really, that you're mentioning here.
Yeah.
I would say that the Moore family is like the Kennedys here in Redlands, practically.
I hardly think that, but
Okay.
anyway.
Maybe inflating the role of the
Please.
Redlands Daily Facts to my
Yeah.
benefit. So, Paul ran it, and
He and my father hadn't planned to go into the newspaper business. He was wanted to go into business, but it was during the Depression, and he couldn't find a job. And that was about the same thing with Frank, is how they both got into it. I know some of the stories say they were groomed, but I think they just out of necessity.
the last resort.
And
Were there more than two brothers, or were they the entire?
there were a sister, Ruth Mary Kidd, who also worked here at the Facts, and Tommy, the youngest brother, who was in the Marines, and then he did something with paper. He was in South America quite a bit.
Okay, I'm going to back you up.
Okay.
We had the captain,
Yes.
who ran it for a short time before handing it over to his son, Paul, your grandfather,
Right.
in 19...
It would be 1899 is
1899.
is when Captain Moore died.
Okay, and Paul ran it for...
We have till 1941 then.
Oh,
Or
long
42,
time.
I take it back, he died in 42.
Okay.
And it was felt, of course the war broke out in 41, and I can remember we were going to the desert, we were going to have a picnic there, and it came over the radio, and Dad was trying to decide whether to come back and put out an extra. It was on a Sunday, and they didn't publish on Sundays. And then he decided not to. And as far as my grandfather, they felt the stress of the war maybe helped his heart attack along. The Facts had a hard time during the Depression keeping their it in the black.
Mhm.
So they had all this Christmas advertising, and everybody canceled the Christmas advertising, and things were looking bleak again, and it may have not been, but anyway, he had a heart attack in April of 1942. And I can remember going to see him. I was born in 1936, and so I would have been 6. He was in a hospital bed at the house on Highland and Pacific that the U of R president is now living in. And he was in the library in a hospital bed with all these oxygen things around, and he died shortly after that. So Dad was, I think, 32, and Frank was 30. So they took it over.
And they took it over, your dad as the publisher.
And Frank as the editor.
And Frank as the editor. And we are sitting in Frank's office.
Yeah.
Okay, so they took over having been not necessarily groomed, but they probably grew up in the environment
yes, they did, yes. So
of a newsroom. And I said that they were here, but they weren't at first.
Mhm.
The Redlands Daily Facts office was on Citrus.
Citrus and Fifth. And it was there, yeah, I think it was somewhere else to begin with, and then it was there. I kind of forget all the history. But yes, I can remember working at the old building just for a little bit during the summer. Well, this is when my first task was to clean off John Lanker's desk, and it was just piled full of everything. And it's when the zinc plates, or they etched the photographs were on a block with, I think it was a zinc thing. And I had labeled all those and organized everything, and poor John came back from vacation and just practically had a heart attack. I thought he was never going to speak to me again. But so, and another time when we were in the new building, and I was working
This
here.
building?
Yes, yes. And they had the phone, were the ones where you plug them in and out and what have you. And something was going on with the police chief, I can't remember. But I put in a couple of calls, and Dick West came just storming out. What are you trying to do? Start World War III? I'd put the two parties, opposite parties, talking to each other.
Oh, no!
So he was not very happy with me either. But Dick was wonderful. He really was a gifted writer. And Dick was the, took over, he was, I think, the newsroom head.
The news editor?
I think, yeah, and of course he was there forever, and wonderful writer, and they had a good staff. Bill and Frank were just amazing. They got along so well, and to see two brothers do that, and so many people say, "Oh, the paper's not the same. Why, when you sold it?"
They
blah,
sure
blah,
do.
blah. And Frank always says, "Well, you know, they forget all the things they used to say about us." So
I really appreciate hearing that. I have, according to Redlands, caused your ancestors to roll over in their graves many times. Going down to 6 days a week was the biggest offense, so I love to hear that you didn't publish on Sundays.
Well, you know, because they were always just 6 days a week.
I
So
know.
I forget. I think after Don Ray took over is when they went. So, and it was a sad day, but I think as far as the family was concerned, it was a good choice. I don't know. I think there would have been too many family members trying to run it. We probably wouldn't have gotten along as well as Bill and Frank.
Well, and there were your great-grandfather and your grandfather before them, but Frank and Bill are really the ones that people talk about as the Redlands Daily Facts.
Yeah.
So it was interesting to me to hear that they fell into it and they weren't groomed for it, but they ran it with what I think people in the community would call perfection, expertise. They were the ones who knew how to do a community newspaper right.
Well, Frank was absolutely amazing when you think about it now, because he wrote 12,500 columns, I think. He wrote a daily column, The Grain of Salt, and an editorial. And I don't think anybody does anything like that.
That's a lot of work.
Yeah. And Dad wrote only when he went on trips, and he would take his portable typewriter, and sometimes he would send things back to help Frank out, because things got pretty busy when that happened. And then my brother worked in the press room, and when they converted to the computers, they were pretty early in computers. Well, maybe the whole newspaper industry probably was, because my father managed to somehow erase all the classifieds when my brother was on vacation. And that was just horrendous. So anyway. And then poor Frank, he started out would write columns on the computer, and then they would disappear just when he had finished them. So he ended up, I think, going back to the typewriter.
Yes, I've heard the story that he would carry his typewriter in here and throw it on the desk. And
So
Carl goes like this when he tells the story, and says that somebody else would have to retype it into a computer.
But I also think that the more talent for writing actually came from the Prendergast side of the family.
Oh, I love it.
Because my father's first cousin was a Time Life correspondent. And my grandfather, back to Frank Prendergast, had written home every year for 16 years. He was from an Irish family in Dublin, and the only living heir. There had been other children, but they had died. And so he would write back. And the letters were kept and bound. And then my father decided to send them back to Curtis Prendergast, the Time Life reporter, so he could do something with them. Well, he never did. And he is 97 years old right now, and I've been talking to him, and he has promised me that his son knows where we'll find them. They're in storage somewhere, and send them to the Heritage Room.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm hoping that will, because he was a civil engineer working on the railroad, surveying for the railroads.
Out here?
Well, more in the Midwest to begin with. They came back to California, to Chula Vista first, and then to Redlands in 1893. They lived on the corner of Pacific and Walnut, the southeast corner.
Okay, just a couple blocks from your family home.
Yes, yes.
I'm going to back you up now and talk about the buildings.
Okay.
We mentioned that maybe there was an original site of the Facts.
I think
I
so.
thought
It's
they
in-
started on 5th and Citrus,
Well,
but you
I'll have to
better
check
than
the book out. You know, the copy of that was done in, was it 1897, the big red book.
Yes.
Yeah, the Illustrated Redlands, yeah.
We have that in
Yeah.
our more.
I thought that there were pictures that they were elsewhere, but I won't swear to it, so.
I will check. I have I'm jumping way ahead now, but I have the special edition
Oh, right,
facts
yes,
thing from when they moved in here,
yes.
which I'd love to look
Yeah.
at, but I'm gonna back, so they were on the corner of Fifth and Citrus, which when I was a child, I think was Cajon Pharmacy, not Cajon Pharmacy, was
The one the Arndts
Pharmacy
had.
City.
The Arndts, Jerry and Darlene Arndt had this pharmacy there.
Yeah, and they had a big cityscape marquee, and it said Pharmacy City, and that was there until, I don't know when, but now it's Redlands Jewelers.
You're right.
And so the fax was there, and you spent time there as a child?
Well, actually, I worked there in high school when I was there for a little bit.
And what was
I
your
worked
major in college? I knew.
Journalism. But I'm actually one who really likes business. I did inheritance tax reports, and I became a California probate referee in 1974 and retired in 1997.
You're one of the lucky ones that made it out.
Yeah. And my husband worked here also, and we came back in 1961, and he was the sports reporter when 61 when they won the CIF championship. So that was when we went to the games, and he worked here until 1975 when I was appointed a probate referee.
He worked for his father-in-law.
Yes, which I was very happy when he retired from
Yeah.
Sometimes it works out well, but it was a little tense. I got a little tired of my mother telling me what all my husband was doing wrong. So anyway.
And your husband's name was?
Tam, and this is a story too. My mother and grandmother went to Europe in 1926 on a freighter, and at the same time was Ruth Lehane, and who was turned out to be Tam's mother. And Ruth Lehane was in between my grandmother's and my mother's age. And my grandmother was widowed, and so she ended up doing quite a few things with Ruth, and they always kept up their relationship. So I think I was away at college, and my mother wrote and said, "These old friends of ours have brought by their son, who was stationed at March Air Force Base, and his name is Tam, not Tom, Tam, because he looked like he had a Tam O'Shanter on. Though actually his real name was Thomas. But, so I thought, oh, I don't know. And I was going with someone else, but during Christmas vacation I fixed him up with some blind dates, and then I decided, what am I doing getting blind dates? I like him.
So this was, your family was trying to set you up with him, and
well,
you were trying to pawn him off on somebody else?
Yeah. Well, I don't know whether they were necessarily trying to set us up. He was stationed at March, and he used to go over and stay at Frank and Sid's a lot. And then when my parents were married in 1934, and on their honeymoon, they visited Ruth and Les Irving, and Tam was just a little baby. So they saw their son-in-law before their daughter was born. So,
wow.
So that.
And when you say Frank and Sid, you're talking about Frank Moore and his wife?
Yes, Sydney. And that's the other thing. They married sisters. They were going to a dance somewhere, and Aunt Sydney, something happened to her date. And so Dad said, well, she's just going to have to go with Frank. And so turned out they ended up getting married. So their sister.
Bill and Frank married sisters?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Oh, you didn't? No.
So,
they're double cousins on the.
Wow.
And then my mother's other sister was married to Dan Smith, Dan C.A. Smith. And that family home at 916 West Olive is still owned by the Smith family.
916 West Olive is going to be down toward the hospital?
Yes, it's on the, well, as you go out, it's just past Millbury Place, and between,
is it brick? Is it an old brick?
No, it's white, it's in an orange, set in an orange grove.
Okay, I know just the one.
And they sell oranges.
Yes.
Up front.
Okay. So you were 6 years old, I'm sorry, it was 1961, you said, when your husband was
It started at the Redlands Daily Facts,
Started-
yes,
okay.
and he worked here until 1975.
So 5 years after they moved into this building, your father and uncle bought the land here on
Yes.
the corner of Brookside and Center.
Correct.
And I want to say at the same time that the city bought the land next door for what was then the DMV.
Yes, I think, yes, because the DMV came in, yes, was next door.
Some gentleman came in here and said he was the realtor that managed the transaction for both properties at the same time.
Was that the Leonard family or not?
I don't know, I wrote it down, but I don't remember off the top of my head. So they bought this property in the early 50s, and this building opened in 1956?
Yes.
And it was newfangled and a big deal,
Oh,
according
right.
to this publication that I discovered.
Yeah, and Ben Robbie was the architect, and and then the move was tremendous, I think, I was away at the time, and Mother would write and tell me about how horrendous it was trying to move from the one to the other and still keep publishing, so.
Oh my gosh, I
Yeah.
can't even imagine how they did that.
So,
And there's
Yeah.
a courtyard in the center
yes,
here.
I wanted to go take a peek at it, I will.
I hope it gets warm enough to go outside. It's in the 30s, I think, right now. But the fountain, I want to talk about this fountain. Nelda and I are having a very civilized war over what's going to happen to those tiles. But there's a fountain with pink tiles out there. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't even remember it, no. I should have
take you out
looked
to
before
see
I
it before
came.
we must go out there and look. The tiles are custom painted, some of them with Redlands landmarks. There's the Assistencia, the Lincoln Shrine, and other places in Redlands. And some of them are Redlands Daily Facts, historical. There's a clock that's on 3 o'clock because that's press time.
Oh, right.
And I was told that originally it was 3 o'clock in the morning, but I mean, I have it backward. And then they changed from a morning paper to an afternoon paper, and their press time was 3 o'clock in the afternoon, so it was fine, they didn't need to replace the time. There's one of a little boy on a bicycle with a Daily Facts bag, delivery bag,
Huh.
and there's the type. And Nelda pointed out to me the significance of the letters. There are 2 of each tile, but for this particular one, there's 3 letters on one and 3 different letters on the other. I can't believe that you don't know what I'm talking about. And it was a symbol, that's significant, I hope I can remember, but it was when you need to insert something else there.
Oh.
And so those were and it's nonsense letters to me, but that signaled that you needed to insert with the little brass letters. They're probably not brass. Anyway, I'll take you out and see it. I would like to, at some point, if we ever move, take those tiles and put them in my kitchen. I want those tiles. And Nelda says,
Nelda wants them for the museum.
No, heck no.
So,
You're gonna have
but
to get them out of my hands.
the press time, I think when they had the facts was at 1 o'clock, I believe, well, maybe 3.
In the morning or the afternoon?
No, it was afternoon, because it was an afternoon paper.
Okay.
So, in fact, it came out at 3, so I think the deadline was 1 o'clock, because my mother was very happy that my birth managed to, I was born at 11, so they could get it in the facts that day.
Oh.
Because this was always very important back then, where you wanted, now you don't need to get the news in right away, but
I think that's the opposite of true.
Yeah,
We
right.
have, because the internet is
yeah,
there,
it's,
we have to have it in within 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have to have it in more immediately, and by the time it hits print in the morning, it's hardly relevant anymore. Everybody knew about it already.
Yeah, well,
But,
that's it.
okay, so 1956, they move into this building. You're away. 1961, your husband starts working
Yes,
there.
we were married in 57. We lived in the Berkeley area for a while and then came down here, so.
And resettled in Redlands?
Yes, and been here. I'm the only original person in the tract. I live on Felicia Court, and we bought it in 1961. There was nothing but red clay all around, and my husband was about ready to leave and go back to Berkeley. We had no air conditioning, and
no.
so Burgeson's came up and put a swamp cooler in after we were there about 4 days. And the dirt, Redlands is definitely named after, or the clay did not come out of the children's closed, which I did not realize until they practically ruined everything they owned. So anyway.
You raised your children here?
Yes, and they all graduated from Redlands High School, and my grandson, who just graduated in 2011, was fifth generation through Redlands High School. So.
What school did they go to for junior high?
Well, Redlands, oh, wait a minute, Cope.
You're kidding me!
Yeah,
Okay!
so,
Wow.
well, wait a minute, I take it back. James went to Cope. No, actually, the other children went to Moore.
Okay.
Because our only boy, Peter, was always very active, always. I was seeing Mr. Ronan at times. In fact, the Bueys, Brian Buey and Peter were, well, what one of them didn't think to do, the other one did. So, so we were down at Moore Junior High quite a bit, come to think of it. And a few years later, I got a call from Moore, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what have they done now? And I thought, I don't have anybody going to Moore Junior High. I was on the emergency list for somebody, so anyway,
That's
a
great.
heart attack, so.
So Moore Junior High, which is now Moore Middle School,
Yeah.
was built 40, oh, how good is my history, 46 years ago?
It was 1966 was when it was dedicated, and it was to the Moore family. I know at times it said to the Moore brothers, but it was actually for the entire Moore family.
Okay, and I want to be clear, that's named after your family.
Yes.
This
yes.
middle school is honoring your
Yes,
family.
the whole Moore, I mean my great-grandfather, my grandfather, the Moore brothers, and so.
How old were you when they built that?
Well, let's see, as I say, I was in my 30s, I think.
Oh, you were?
Yeah. Okay, in fact, 66, I was 30.
Oh,
So-
okay. What was that like? I can't even imagine having something named after me like that.
Well, I don't remember. Well, you mean the family name was always with the newspaper, but it's just something you kind of grow up with, and when you're in high school, you don't want anybody to know it, so you have to go, oh no, I don't have them, so anyway.
I think my kids do that.
Yeah, right.
It's a different Momberger entirely.
So, and then one other quick thing, my mother and father lived across, my mother moved to California in 1918, just after my grandfather died in the flu epidemic.
This is your mother's father.
This is Josephine Cook Moore,
Okay.
Bill's wife and my mother.
Okay.
And they lived across the street from each other for a short period of time. And Mother had her first date with Dad, but then they didn't see each other for quite a while. And then when he was in college, they started dating, and they were married then in 1934. And then Sid and Frank married after that, the two, so the brothers and the sisters.
Now, you said you have memories of growing up in Redlands you wanted to share. You were born here?
Yes, in 1936, I lived on, we lived in Alvarado at first, 519 Alvarado, and those were the days when there was the ice truck came around some. We had a refrigerator, but you'd get the little pieces of ice. Mm-hmm. And then the fish man would come around and bring the, Frank Silva would bring the fish on Fridays, and but then we had to move because Barton Ruggles of the Barton family, they owned the house that we were renting. So we moved to Buena Vista, 712 South Buena Vista, and that just became a heritage home. In fact.
Oh, really?
Yes. And we had, we thought we just died and gone to heaven. We had air conditioning, which was a swamp cooler, but it worked a lot better in those days. And the other interesting thing about Buena Vista, there were 4 of us that went to Redlands High School. Jean Phoenix Vanderpool, who lived across the street, her dad had Phoenix Motors. Then there was, or Phoenix Motor Parts. And Sandra Danielson, whose father worked for the post office, and Arlene Walser Alsop, who was a new, fairly new to Redlands, and Selma Peterson. we all grew up together. We all live within 2 miles of each other right now. And Arlene and I were both born on February 29th, 1936, which is an unusual birthday.
Yeah.
And we now live a block and a half away. So,
Wow.
so we're all Redlands. Yes.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and as I said before, that I love Redlands and I plan to be carried out of here. So anyway.
You're not going anywhere.
Yeah, right.
Are there other Moore descendants who are still here?
Actually, just my children. My middle daughter, Joanne, is married to Paul Snowden, and they live in my mother and father's house on Poppy Road.
Is James your grandson?
Yes.
I know the Snowdens.
Oh, good. So, and they live, it's across from Carolyn Park and Billy Daniels' house. And they've had Nicole and James. And James tells me he's going to come back and live in Redlands, but who knows whether that will happen.
He's at City of Redlands.
Yes.
With my son.
Oh, are they both there?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they were in the same dormitory building last
For
year.
heaven's sakes, why didn't anybody ever tell me that? I don't know. Anyway, and then my daughter Janet Irving lives in Redlands, and she lives down in the Raymar apartments here, or the Raymar Co-op. And so we're the Redlands, and as I say, my brother lives in Idaho. He moved to Idaho probably 25 years ago.
And he didn't go into journalism?
Well, he worked in the press. He was in the press room the whole time. In fact, he even worked for 1 year.
Oh, you're talking about Groff.
Yeah, Groff, excuse me. I'm sorry. Groff, who was William Groff Moore, Jr.
Okay, yeah.
And,
Ronnie Munoz talked about him and brought in photos of him.
Yeah, and no, I went to Ed Hales Jr.'s party, celebration at the Elks Pub, and a lot of my brother's friends were there. And my brother was rather wild, and so I know everybody says, "Oh, you're Groff Moore's sister? Wow!" So anyway, that is, and so I think I'm hoping that somebody will continue to live in Redlands. And the Smith family, though, the one I was talking about, my sisters, my mother's sister's family, now they're 4 of them living in town now, and so we've got a lot of relatives.
Have you always subscribed to the Redlands Daily Facts?
Yes.
Do you still subscribe?
Yes, and I think I'm going to take the e-edition. Maybe. I've gotten to the point, I go out, I get the paper, I leave it someplace, then I think, oh, where did I leave the paper? And you know, I like the computer, I like email, and I guess I'm going to have to do the subscription too, because I like to look up things. But my mother's side of the family came in probably 1914, and Harry Cook. My grandmother was Mary Rector Cook, and he came to Redlands probably in about 1915 or so, and we had orange groves. The Cooks had orange groves, and they lost a lot of the acreage in the 1936 flood. They were out by the
flood.
They were out by the river there, the Santa Ana River.
I thought you were going to say the freeze of 1913. No. I was going to jump on you there and show off my knowledge. Yeah. I didn't even think about the flood having taken out orange groves.
It took out a lot of the land there. But he was going with Frances Willis, who is was the first woman ambassador to come up through the ranks, lived in Redlands and on Highland.
On Highland?
Yeah. And rumor was that they were almost engaged, and he went into World War I, and survived and was killed in a train accident. So you wonder, had he come back and they got married, she probably never would have done all the things she did. But,
somebody told, I want to say, Tom Ashley said, his butler built to her, he showed us her house, and he said that, I want to say, Eleanor Roosevelt came here to honor her, and he said that that ambassador, whose name I can't even remember, was probably the most famous woman and accomplished Redlander there has ever been.
Yeah, Frances, I think it was J. Willis, and her grandnephew has written a book that the Heritage Room has with some wonderful pictures and things, and my cousin, or my uncle, I guess he would have been a great uncle, Harry Cook is in the book. And one other interesting thing, I was reading the 100-year-old column in 2008, and it said that John Repuler was at the Wissahickon Inn and had lost his watch. Well, this was my grandmother, Mary Repuler Cook's brother.
Oh.
So he must have been here in 2008. And he developed quite a bit of Banning, and there's Repuler Park in Banning.
Wow.
So.
Yeah, you're at Kennedy.
No, well, as I say, they were a very Republican newspaper.
They, you know, I had intended to talk to you about that,
Oh.
actually. I understand that the Moore family had intended this to be a Republican newspaper, period, and to represent the conservative viewpoint and further the politics of the Republicans in town who had aspirations. Can you talk about that at all? Or do you?
Well, I guess I know Dad went to various conventions, and he was a supporter of Nixon and Eisenhower, and Frank was amazing in as far as the propositions. He would really research. He'd spend a couple of months before the election researching the propositions and suggesting how people should vote. And I know many people just were upset when they didn't have his guidance to follow. And they did, I suppose, I don't know whether that was actually true that they wanted to completely report Republican things. I think they certainly, they were, well, they definitely were a Republican paper, but I don't know that they were an actual instrument.
Well, I understand the President McKinley praised them and their coverage.
Yeah, and I wish I could remember, there was some story when Pat Brown came through, and he was in the press room, and I meant to ask my brother what it was that he said, something about Republican or something, and but that was, oh, and the other person that used to come through too was Scotty from Scotty's Castle, which is in Death Valley, would come out to the paper, and it was telling stories where he would burn dollar bills and things, but he was quite the character, but he used to come out to the facts sometimes and visit, so.
Well, we get around here now are Cub Scouts.
And well, and the other person too I can think of was Gwen Prendergast, who was Jenny Davis's daughter. And they lived on Brookside in a beautiful house that was moved to Fontana. It's in disrepair now. It's on Sierra way up there. And she was wonderful. Reminded me of Cub Scouts. She'd let us bring the Cub Scout troop through and what have you.
Yeah, I do a lot of those tours, so they get their badge.
Because we have 5 children, and actually, they say 2 of them are still in Redlands, and my daughter, Sydney, had worked at the paper a very short period of time. In fact, she was very upset. She was here working in the circulation when she found out the paper was being sold. She didn't know that. And
to Don Ray?
Yes, that was in 1981, and she worked just a short time. And then she came back to Redlands for the last few years, got her nursing degree from Loma Linda, and then moved back to Santa Cruz. So she prefers Santa Cruz, although I think she liked being in Redlands for a while. So
the paper was sold from Moore ownership after almost 100 years.
Yes,
to Don Ray, which is a corporation, and then they competed with the Sun. Did they not?
Oh yes, the Sun. Oh, the Sun was the big. You know, you didn't if you. More, you didn't take the Sun newspaper.
And
but of course now it seems interesting to have them all in one. Yes.
The Redlands that I grew up in, everybody took the Sun and the Facts, and you got your county news or state or national news from the Sun, and you got your local news from the Facts.
Yeah.
And sometimes the Sun would cover the same thing that the Facts covered, and you'd see who covered it better, but they were definitely competing papers. Then I remember, might have been in the 80s, the Press Enterprise started a branch that covered Redlands and the East Valley, and so there were the 3 papers that you could get. Well, now, I want to say Gannett, I remember the day I saw the news, Gannett merged or bought Don Ray, and the Sun and the Facts were going to be owned by the same company.
Yeah.
That was 1990, wasn't very long, it wasn't in Don Ray for very long, I want to say
No,
maybe it was
it-
1998? Does that sound right, 99? And, of course, now it's Media News Group that owns us, and we are, it's something very different. We are in strong partnership with the Sun. We have our
Right.
meetings together, and we determine content and share reporters and do everything else. The copy desk is the same.
So, no, it's just amazing, because Dad was so worried about the influence of television, and it really didn't hurt the newspaper business, really, but the internet has been a whole different ballgame, and I'm actually amazed that, too, that the Facts is still going. I was afraid that, and I think one of the few papers of this type that is still exists.
Yeah, the community hometown paper, I think, actually has an advantage over the larger metropolitan paper that's competing with a big operation like CNN.com or other stronger. As long as CNN and MSNBC are not publishing the AYSO soccer scores, I feel pretty safe.
Well,
We're good.
Well, and I think it's just so important too to have the Redlands and know what's going on in Redlands. And I like the way a lot of the things you put in quite often, because I think, oh, I forgot to mark that down. Okay, now when was that? And then I can look at it and again. So.
Yeah, that's Betty. That's Betty's Our Town, which I think is the highlight. That's what everybody loves the best. We are starting the celebration for the city's 125th anniversary. Were these milestones that meant something to you as a Moore? Did you get your, do you have the same copy hanging in your house?
Oh yes, I have got, well, not hanging, but I've
I've
got boxes and boxes of newspaper clippings, grain of salt, and
oh, yeah.
and that I really need to do something about sometime.
Give them to me.
Well, if you want.
I'll take them.
And, because that's the thing, it's a little difficult to even find. I think the library still has the Rolodex where you look things up, which Frank, I think, was big in making sure they had the, not Rolodex, reader, whatever it is.
The microfilm.
And the go like this, takes forever to find anything. So a lot of this is available, but it takes forever to...
Well, you know, we have the issues
Oh, right, yes.
bound in books on shelves all the way back, and they're falling apart.
Yeah.
The ones that are from the early 1800s are falling apart. But when I give the Cub Scout tours and we go through them more, the kids are impressed. The kids love that, but the parents go crazy when they look at those books and say, oh my gosh, can I touch them? Can I pull them down? Can I look at them?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is special, I think, to hold on to these old issues. And,
So, well, in the celebrations, I remember more the one where I know my husband grew a beard, and all the Facts people grew a beard, and there was a pioneer dinner. I don't know why I don't remember too much of the 100th. I don't know what.
was that the Golden Jubilee?
No, that would have been would have been the Golden. Okay, 100th.
Everybody at the Facts grew a beard?
Yes, and that was 25. Was that? Oh, wait, was that the? Okay, what was the one before would have been...
The 100th.
And then...
The city's 100th?
The 75th. I think it was the 75th when they grew the beards and what have you.
Betty just showed me a photo of that, of all the men here with
Right,
the
the
beards.
beards, yes. And there was a pioneer dinner, and I remember doing quite a bit of things for the 75th, and for some reason, I don't know why, I don't remember doing as much for the 100th, but I did buy some of the commemorative plates that, Malcott, I'm not pronouncing it right, Tom...
Mendlicott.
Yes.
I know who you're talking about. He does the stained glass windows at the library.
Yes, and he did memorial things. Oh, and stained glass windows, that reminds me that the Congregational Church, there are two windows there that were in memory of my grandfather, Francis E. Prendergast. When he died, the family gave windows to the Congregational Church. And this was my grandmother, Lucretia Moore's father.
Oh my gosh.
So,
Wow.
And let's see, what was the question again?
It's a very general and unfair question. Well, these milestones that we hit, the paper's 100th anniversary, we just marked our 122nd anniversary, which I erroneously called our 123rd. I blame Betty. She came in and said, and I failed to do the math, which is really my own fault. But yeah, when we hit these milestones, do you celebrate a little, and do you I'm proud of that?
Yeah. Well, I am proud of my heritage. I love the Redlands history, and I mean the bowl, and there's just so many wonderful things in the library. So history has been very important, and I think the museum's very important too. I hope that they eventually get a building.
You're talking about the Redlands Historical Museum, not the San Bernardino County Museum.
No, the Redlands, yes, Redlands. That we may, as Nelda says, we wonder if we're going to see it in our lifetime. But anyway, and Dad was very, very interested in history. Well, the Facts, I think, would try to publish a lot of things. So I hope the continuation of history, and that we will be able to do things through the museum. And you think the Redlands Bowl is just very unusual, really, and there's just so many organizations. I mean, the Redlands Country Club, isn't it the oldest country club, I think? In California, and the Rotary, the Spinet's the oldest. And my grandmother Moore was very active in the Spinet.
Oh, she was?
Yes. In fact, she was very active until she had a heart attack in 1935. She was, I think, in the Republican Central Committee and grand jury, I believe, and had done a lot with music. My grandfather was not one, Paul Moore, too much of a lover of classical music. And unfortunately, I think I inherited his non-love of classical music. So, and but my grandmother did a lot of bringing some of the performers. This was before the bowl and out. And no, that Frank has a story in one of his columns that she was just determined that one of her prodigy would be a piano player.
Oh.
Well, he said it. A lot of piano teachers got very rich, and my dad finally had one song in his repertoire that he played, and nobody ended up following her love. Well, Dad liked classical music, and he would go to all the symphonies, and
but he didn't play.
No, so I don't think there's much talent.
Well, Mr. Howe, who founded the Redlands Daily Facts, said that the point of the paper was to be, from the inception of the city, a service to document the history of this community, so that exactly where we are now, we would have it. We would say we're 125 years old, and here's the entire history of Redlands documented and recorded. So I think that you're a major part of this celebration as we go into the Quasquicentennial. It's so relevant to talk to you.
Well, and one other thing I forgot is the Fifth Avenue swimming pool, which is just absolutely amazing. It's been over 100 years, and
has it been there that long?
Yeah, it was a reservoir though. It wasn't an actual used as a pool. But in fact, we have some history that one of the women who was taking one of Larry and Tom's courses wrote a history in 1975, and that's in the Heritage Room now for that. And but no, it's still dearly loved, and so many people don't know it's there either. It's sort of, you can go by Ford and not know it's there at all, but it's still flourishing, and it has a waiting list now. Or, of course, the Y pool is quite nice now. So.
Brand new, yeah, absolutely fabulous facility.
So.
Thank you very much for joining us,
it,
sharing your memories and your story, and certainly feel especially connected and appreciative of your time today.
As they say, I'm just so glad to have a Redlands native at the helm. So.
Thank you.